If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today I'm joined by Simon Kearney, a seasoned high-performance expert and the founder of Readiness, a platform that brings elite sports science to everyday life. With over 20 years in the AFL, NRL, and elite conditioning, Simon now helps businesses and individuals monitor their psychological well-being just like we used to do with pro athletes. In this episode, we introduce you to the Readiness questionnaire, a powerful tool for proactively tracking your mental state. This digital check-in assesses key areas such as mood, stress, sleep quality, hydration, energy levels, and overall psychological safety, providing a comprehensive snapshot of your mental well-being. By identifying subtle shifts early on, it empowers you to make timely adjustments, be it modifying your workload, improving sleep habits, or seeking support before minor issues escalate into major challenges. We'll explore how small, consistent check-ins can lead to significant performance gains, why combining data with human empathy is essential, and how organizations can foster thriving environments by truly understanding their people. If you've ever wondered how to stay mentally dialed in, prevent burnout, and bring your A game both to work and life, this conversation's for you. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody. I'm here with my great friend, Simon Kearney. Simon, welcome.
Jez, thanks for having me, mate. That beard's thickened up beautifully too over the years. Yeah. Fantastic.
Really coming strong this year, mate.
It's coming strong, mate. Yeah, you got time to do it now. Yeah.
Exactly right. Exactly. I can really keep it groomed.
Thanks for having me, mate. Good to see you again.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate you coming on. And this is an area that we're really passionate about. We view Vitality Collective as being those lessons from pro sport coming into the everyday population. And I know that's exactly what you're doing with Readiness. And so I'd love to dive into exactly how you made that transition, a little bit about your background and your journey out of sport.
Yeah, Jez, as you know, mate, we caught up, when was it? Late 2017, 18, somewhere around there. And
yeah.
I've had 20, bit like yourself, but I've had a bit over 20 years in elite sport here in Australia and in AFL, NRL, rugby league, AFL, tennis, and basketball. And yeah, learned some awesome tricks along the way, and how to get the most out of athletes from a performance point of view, and certainly the trend from physical health and the emergence of mental health in that preparation to get the most out of players was a strong evolution sort of over my time there. But had 20 or so years in elite sport in fitness, and met Jerry Ryan, who's a mentor of mine, really ripping guy. Jerry owns Jayco Caravans here in Australia and a number of other businesses, and Jerry owned Melbourne Storm, which is the leading rugby league team here in Australia, where I was head of sports science and conditioning there, and struck up a good mentorship and friendship with Jerry. And then I went to St Kilda Footy Club in the AFL here for about 8 years, of which Jerry's one of his other passions as well. So there's about a 10-year block there where I had a lot to do with Jerry, and he was like a mentor and still is to me. And entered about 2019, before COVID hit, I was burnt out. I was 6.5 days a week for 20 plus years in a highly stressful environment, as you would well and truly know, Jez. Started to take its toll a fair bit, actually. So Jerry sort of said to me midway through that season, "Hey, do you want we should start a business. And Jerry's not the type of bloke you say no to, but let's put it that way. And it was one of those opportunities you go, wow. So yeah, that's sort of how Readiness started. I said, mate, I'd love to do it. What I'd love to do is work out, use the strategies that we use in elite sport to proactively assess the holistic well-being of players to get the most out of them, use that strategy and bring that out into businesses. So that was a pretty easy conversation with him. He's had that trust and that connection there. And he said, righto, show me how we do it. And away we went. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's an amazing story, mate. And one of the things I think is particularly interesting there, we talk a lot, and I think pro sport is viewed a lot through that physical lens. And what we know is that there's a whole, maybe even larger component of sport, which is the psychological well-being of the athlete, both psychological preparedness and then just the basics of mental well-being. When do you think that started to really come to the fore in sport?
Great question, Jez. I reckon so. Part of the strategy that you would be well aware of as well is to get information out of players. You need some regular check-ins. So players would fill out a short survey 2 or 3 times a week. And mate, it's such a good question. I reckon I saw a shift around 2010 to 13 around there, where more of the questions and more of the information we needed to get out of players was not just about lower back, hamstring, knee pain, so on and so forth. Yes, it's incredibly important, but how are you sleeping? What are your stresses like? How's your home life going? Because what we were finding, we would have it, regardless of the sport I was involved in, you'd have a readiness report for the doctors and the physios and the coaches and everything. And as you know, you analyze everything from a GPS point of view. You're looking at imbalances left and right side from a strength and power point of view in the gym. We're looking at hydration. You're looking at muscle soreness, so on and so forth. And you could have players who just tick the box and are green lights all the way in all of that, but they're still not preparing. They're not getting a kick on the weekend. Like they're a mile off, but they're just fantastic. So I remember in that phase, it's like, well, what's going on? We need more information around this. And it turns out, players would have new babies in the house and they weren't sleeping. They're broken up with their partner. They've got relationship issues and there's the stress that comes along with that. Another big one was players were in their last year of their contracts and they're in their early 30s and there's not much of a plan B going on. So they're stressed around what the future holds as well, which was all these non-physical reasons were having a huge impact on performance on the weekend. And in sport, unless it's in the Olympics and you've got to really find out, you get a check in every 4 years. But in the sports I was used to, and you yourself, mate, was every 5, 6, 7 days you get a good reminder of where you're at as a team, as an individual in terms of performance. So, which is not a bad thing because then you've got time and plenty of opportunity to act on that and improve on that. So, I think it's just getting bigger and bigger. But yeah, I reckon around 2010, 11, 12, 13, around there was a bit more of a shift.
Yeah, and I think you've raised a number of really interesting points there. I think the introduction of that, as we started realizing there was more to the athlete than just their physical being, they're humans as well, right? They have families with the same dynamics everyone else does. They have things breaking down in their homes, their cars, all of the real world stresses that we have, the athlete has. And I think that's such an important part of bringing those players on, very young players coming into clubs with no real life skills. And then you give them a massive paycheck and drop them in a new city away from all of their support network and wonder why they're not performing. Right. You said physical, everything is really dialed in by the team. And we really saw a big impact there.
Yeah, I think, and mate, even over in Australia here, with your background in, in NBA especially, Jez, which is one of the huge sports that we look up to over here in Australia. You'd be able to tell this story better than me, but I've always not been surprised at how the general public sort of don't realise that, as you said, Kevin Durant still has car issues. There's all these, and our elite players over here. They still need to pick the dog poo up out the backyard. There's still there's all these issues. They're no different, and it's and all these other stresses too that come along the way that impact performance, and we see that with Readiness with our clients now that you've got some issues on at home, you're going to bring those issues into work, or it's going to at least affect your performance at work. And then certainly the pressures that come along with work, the dog cops it on the way in the door at home, if you've got stresses at work, and then it affects you how you function as a husband or a wife or a mother or father or a friend outside of work. So that's sort of that symmetry there between the sport and business life.
That's something that we're recognizing every day as we've come out of that elite environment and into everyday life, is that performance is performance. And anyone with a human body, you're really preparing to perform every time you have a meeting, every time you're talking to your clients, every time you're in a sales pitch. These are just performances that you need your body and your mind to be dialed in for. And so there really are some really linear parallels between professional sport and performing in your job. So I'd love to start diving into that. Where did you see that as a need? So when your mentor comes to you and said, like, okay, let's start a business, did that immediately come to you, or did you sort of go looking through your processes and think, what could we do here?
Good question, Jez. I'd had a bit of an idea around this, because one part of my role over the years was the information from players around how they're feeling and how they're tracking would come into me first. I would then make informed decisions led by the data and obviously communicating with the player to intervene and educate, and then manipulate the workloads, for instance, that they were doing for the day, go and have a chat with the Wellbeing and psychs. If I want to go and see the psych, one of Australia's best sports psychs, he's in the next office. So it's very easy. That's the difference where it's a bit harder, but and we'll get to that probably in a sec. But I think once we decided to sort of move down this path, fortunately Jerry owns a hell of a lot of businesses, so I was able to spend half a day a week while I was still in sport, just having a chat to business owners, and I had nothing really to show them, but I just would show them, hey, this is what we do in sport to get the most out of our players and get information out of our players and make some data-led decisions that will improve performance at a very holistic manner. And I think I spoke to around 40 or 50 directors and CEOs of random businesses in Australia, and they all, like, it was almost 100% strike rate. Like, they have gone, wow. And it's what we, as you know, mate, what we sort of took for granted and take for granted. It's like, so we live in that bubble of elite sport, and you sort of get out of that bubble, and it's like, right, what can we bring out into the real world? So it was a no-brainer by the end of it. And back on your point, Jez, around they're just, we're all human beings. And our list of clients are really diverse. So we've got blue collar, white collar. We've got lawyers, recruiters, real estate agents, plumbers, sparkies, you name it. They're human beings. They just happen to do a certain job, which led back to one of my initial discussions with Jerry. I said, mate, if we are to do this, we need the science behind what we do, because there's a stack of wellbeing programs out there, this with sort of not a great science behind it. So that was the first thing we did. Was COVID hit, actually. It was 2/20/21, and Jerry's, and again, Jerry owns Green Edge Cycling and all the rest. So his passion for staying ahead of the curve and sports science, and I knew this with our 10-year sort of relationship, this would be a very easy sell to Jerry. So we met with Swinburne University Centre for Mental Health, and basically gave them, I drove them insane, Jez, for 2 years. The first research was, okay, I want to know what are the major factors that have the greatest bearing on our well-being as human beings at work and away from work, which we worked out.
So Simon, let me just pause you for a second there.
Yeah.
Let's really clear up for the collective here who are listening. We're talking about the well-being factors in sport, and to be really specific here, we implemented in sport, and you were one of the guys that really led the charge on this, the wellness questionnaire. So this is something that would go out to the players every morning and assess them on how they are feeling, their subjective opinion on a number of different factors.
Exactly.
And so that's what we're talking about here, is bringing that system of monitoring the athlete's well-being out into the real world. So Simon, as you're doing that, you say before you could make that product, you wanted to go in and really dial in from a scientific basis what those factors should be.
Yeah. So if we were going to assess, intervene, educate, and refer and get that support around that person or that group of people, that business, we want to make sure that we're dealing with the big ticket items. So, we don't want to be really, and in terms of engagement as well, like you don't want to be filling out a survey that takes 20 minutes 3 times a week.
Right.
Like we're talking, right. You're on your phone, you're on and off in under a minute. It's quick and it's easy, and we're dealing with the big ticket factors or the big ticket numbers that influence your well-being the most.
Right.
And so we found out through the research, what those factors were both at home and at work. And then part 2 of the research was, okay, now that we've highlighted what the key factors are, what's the weighting of these factors? So if Jeremy Bettle's filling out a wellness and readiness check-in survey, what percentage does sleep have to do with his overall well-being versus mind, mood, engagement, work-life balance, culture within the workplace, so on and so forth. Let's absolutely focus in on those factors that have the greatest bearing on our well-being at work, away from work, regardless what we do, because we treat the human being, they just, as I said, they happen to be a hairdresser or they happen to be a plumber. Yeah.
And how individual is all of that?
Well, that comes back to the dashboards that we use. So we can customize the well-being surveys that get asked depending on what the individual would like or what the business would like as well. But then if I was to ask you, Jez, how you feeling? Are you okay? Yeah, not bad. I mean, I won't answer for you, but what we do is we take that guesswork out. So we've got our 20 factors that we look at, or 25 factors plus that we look at, and it will rank them from lowest to highest. So, what are the factors I need to put some energy and effort into, and what are the factors that I'm really flourishing in and thriving in, I'm going really well in. So it kind of takes that generic guesswork out, and then we've got, stacks and stacks of interventions and expert help and resources and education to help you in whatever areas that you want to. And they get presented to you at the back end of the check-ins, but there's a library there that you can check in 24 hours a day and have a look at. Plus we've got the experts for one-on-ones and group stuff as well. So it's replicating that sort of team environment and that high performance environment surrounded by good people and expert people in sport, but you're able to do it at your own pace and it's not too intrusive.
And then I guess over time, Simon, you see these trends emerging, and is that represented in the dashboard? So we'll see somebody maybe on that day is really struggling, but that might be a bit out of the ordinary for them. Yeah. But they do have a consistent trend in certain areas. Yeah.
So data security is massive, Jez, as we know. So each individual gets their own dashboard and it tracks your overall well-being, but then breaks it down into all those factors, and you can dial in and see, you might have an anomaly there where you're a bit of an outlier that's a bit out of the norm, and it will show you how far you've sort of skewed off the norm there and give you solutions and interventions to help you on that.
Right.
But the big part there, as you know, with any culture, Jez, in any environment, it starts at the top. So the leaders in the organisation see all the de-identified data across the whole of organisation. So again, it's like you and I with our sporting teams. I can see all the well, it's not all de-identified in that sense, but I can see the trends across all 45 players, for example. And it's all about being proactive and nipping things in the bud before they become an issue. So I think in general society, we're quite reactive. I think what we do really well in elite sport is be proactive, and it's all about whether you're trying to prevent a hamstring from occurring or a stress snowballing into something that didn't need to get into that instance in the first time. It's using the data to predict the trends and put some stop signs up before things get out of hand. So the decision makers can really hone in on departments and divisions and locations of the business and the whole business as a whole, across all of those factors, to make some really smart performance decisions around to get the most out of their staff.
Yeah, I love that notion of being proactive here with the psychological well-being of your employees, your whole workforce, really, and the longitudinal data, where if you do see somebody trending in the wrong direction, it's a small tweak and maybe some education and intervention, versus waiting for a blow up.
Exactly.
In a sporting sense, it would be your hamstring tear, but in this case, it might just be that psychological stress that just breaks your employee, and that now they're out of action. So let's talk a bit about those psychosocial hazards, as I've heard you refer to them in the past. What exactly are you looking for here?
So, Jez, here in Australia, we've got pretty much every state now has taken it on, and the last states are within 3 months of bringing on this new legislation. So there's 14 factors that WorkSafe check in on over here that are to do with psychosocial hazards in the workplace. So it can be around bullying, the physical environment of the employees, work-life balance, remote working, job control, skill utilisation. There's 14 of them that WorkSafe at any time can come in and assess and do risk assessments on organisations for that, which has been an outcome from COVID, because everyone's mental health, generally has come out of COVID quite poor. So we've shifted our product a little bit more to focus in on that as well, under those factors, and we've had plenty of awesome results with all of our clients with compliance with that. But mate, it was actually one of I do a day or two a week at Jayco Caravans, working in the mental health. We've got 1,000 employees there, and then I've put the toolkit back on, mate. I've got to set up a recovery rehab gym there, because we get a lot of repeat strain injuries of backs and shoulders and everything, as you do in manufacturing. And talking to one of the employees there who spoke a bit of broken English, but he was saying, I'm seeing so much more that we're doing here at Jayco around proactive mental health stuff, and what does it all mean? And I was explaining exactly what it was there, and he goes, so it's sort of like the mental health version of the physical OH&S, where we've got to put our high vis on and our glasses on and our ears in before we go out onto the manufacturing plant and in the workshops. I said, that's an outstanding analogy. Yeah. So it's the mental health version of the physical health OH&S acts, with all the high vis and everything like that. So we're protecting the psychology of all the staff, and controlling the controllables within the organisation. So my next question to him was, how long did it take for you to get used to putting your PPE gear on and everything? He said, years. And everyone's, we still get pulled up for forgetting stuff. I said, well, it's going to take probably longer, with these psychosocial hazards in the workplace, but we're ahead of the curve with that, and we assess those risks. We've got plenty of interventions and education and experts to come in and help the leaders comply with the new legislation. So it's a huge movement, Jez. It's a massive movement over here. Yeah.
And so talk about the why should people care about it, right? He's come in and he said, well, what's it about? I think there's two angles I'd like you to talk about here. Why should the employee, the worker, care about this, and why should the employer care about this?
I think it's all performance. And sort of back to what we were saying before is, there's so many, if work-life balance or workload for as an example, if you're overworked, the outcomes that you're going to produce at work, and then the outcomes you're going to produce in your private life, if you're not sleeping because you're overworked and you're stressed, it's going to wear you down. And I experienced that myself, with some burnout in 2019, and I remember, Jez, catching up with you a few times there, and you've just worked your 40th day straight in about your 28th state in a row. Yeah. It takes its toll. It takes its toll, and it's you look at I'd much rather break a leg or something like that, have a physical injury, than have a mental health injury that just can last years and years and years, as opposed to a broken leg. You're back, 6 weeks time, you're back out there. So,
Well, and I think the interesting thing there is, I often say to people, this would have been easier if you'd torn your ACL.
100%.
Not only will it heal, and it will physically heal, but we have a process in place, and it's visible, it's recognizable. We know exactly how to rehab an ACL now.
Yes.
And yet, with some of these psychological injuries that people in workplaces and otherwise might run into, I think that's the challenge, is that we don't see them. We have a lot of stigma around them.
Yeah.
It's hard to recognize, I've been in that same place of burnout. It's very hard to recognize you're falling into that.
Yeah. And it's easy to hide it too, Jez.
Yeah. Yeah. Until it's not.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting parallel between the physical injury and the psychological. And so what are some of the things that you're starting to see from the employee perspective? Like, what's coming up for you guys as you do more and more of these surveys?
Yeah, one of the beauty of it is we've got such a diverse list of clients. We get the trends, like we see the trends across all of them, and we can break it down into sectors as well. But certainly financial well-being is number one. It's the big stress that we see across all sectors. Work-life balance is another one as well. And traumatic events is a big one. So, how well could your organisation handle a traumatic event? And that's rated quite low at the moment. So we've then been able to partner with the experts in those areas and deliver interventions and resources and education and experts to attack those aspects of it. And one of the other parts too, Jez, was the feedback we get from employees is, when we developed the tech ourselves during the research phase during COVID, I said to our developers, hey, one of the non-negotiables I want is we need a buddy system, because I've lost count of how many fires I've put out over the years of just having a conversation with a player, especially, mate, as you know, in all male environments, there's the stigma, you just shut up and move on sort of thing. Having the ability and seeing slight little off-trend moments within the player's data, being able to break the ice and have that conversation with them, and then away you go. It's a good day. Now that we know what's going on, we can get you the help that you need. But it all comes back to that stigma there. So implementing the buddy system in Readiness has been great. So it's a messaging system. You can nominate anyone in your workforce or anyone outside of your workforce to be your buddy. They are the only people that will see your data. And if you don't have a buddy, it's a self-assessment and no one sees your data. But we've had some absolute red flag crisis moments where the buddy system and the messaging systems kicked in around suicide prevention and domestic violence, even through the little things like you and I could be best mates at work. Neither of us are a counsellor or a psych, but I might fill out my survey and go, hey, Jez, can we grab a coffee at 2:00 today? I need a chat. You and I can have a secure conversation on the platform. We're not on company email or WhatsApp or text or anything like that. You can track my data. I can track yours. We could be buddies for multiple people. We could have multiple buddies ourselves. So it's very agile, but it's all around that connection. And some people don't want that, but a lot of people want that human connection on their wellbeing journey. And that's what it is. I mean, it's the data, the app, the technology, the interventions are all fantastic and a huge part of it. But so much can be done by just having a conversation and showing empathy towards someone. And you don't necessarily need the answers for them. They just need to know that you're there with them and you'll help them find the answers. So it's just as powerful, if not more powerful, by having that in there. So that's sort of what to answer your question. Yeah, the employees have been really grateful to have that buddy system as well.
Yeah. It was something that was so important in sport. I think so often this sort of became a box to check. And so it was either emailed out to the players or it was, go fill it in on that computer over there. And there wasn't necessarily that accountability for the staff to really check in on it.
Yeah. Yep.
So having somebody actually go and ask the player and have a conversation around the questionnaire, or stand with them while they filled it in.
Yeah.
The human and the tech interacting here,
Yeah.
I think, is a really critical piece of this, and you can get so much richness. You know, not just a 3 out of 10 on the psychological, you know, how stressed are you scale, but why. And, you know, for this person, a 3 out of 10, for another person might be a 10 out of 10.
Yes.
So
yes. Exactly.
That was really important.
You've got your over reporters and your under reporters. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what about the employer then? So you talked about this from an employee standpoint. Why should the employer care about this?
Well, if they want to get the most out of their staff, some of the best coach, and I sort of always make sporting analogies, and I'm still used to that, but it's some of the best coaches I've ever worked for. It could be a night. You could have a night game. You're leaving the stadium at midnight. You've got a 8 a.m. medical report the following morning in 8 hours' time, and you've got 2 hours worth of data to go through and analysis from the game. I know I've worked best in the past when I push through that, and I want to get that in because I don't want to let the coach down, because he's such a great guy, compared to getting that done through fear that I'm going to get the sack or whatever. But mate, I think the best leaders I've come across, and the best leaders I've come across in business in the last 5 years of Readiness as well, are all very, very, very similar in that approach. Is that they genuinely care about their staff, and they want to create an environment for their staff to absolutely thrive, and they understand that work's only part of this individual. They've got lives outside of there, and allowing them to inviting them into that world if they wanted to as well, or at least having understanding of the person as a whole, will get the most out of that staff member, and get the best outcome as well. And we want everything yesterday. All our information. We're all becoming more and more impatient, and whether we like technology or not, it's here to stay, and it's going to evolve and get better and better and better. So we may as well not fight it. But we want to have that human part to it as well. So it's a really quick and easy way of getting information out of your staff to make some data-led informed decisions with the resources and education there. But no point employees doing all this is if the employees don't act on it. So our best clients who have the best engagement rates will use that de-identified data in WIP meetings and everything and make some decisions. So if the marketing department aren't sleeping too well, they've make changes to their start times or their schedules, or in a number of organisations have gone to a 9-day fortnight based on work-life balance, based on sleeping habits and mind and mood and culture within the workplace that the data has shown. You see the shift within a few weeks of the introduction of a 9-day fortnight, for example. So just the mood just goes through the roof. And actually, in a number of these organisations, you could walk in blindfolded on a Monday, and you'll know, is it a 5-day week or is it a 4-day week of this week for the 9-day fortnight? And just the mood's up and about, and it's you're going to get more out of your staff that way. So it's using data is very, very powerful. In order to get that data, you need to use the tech, and always follow up in person with your staff on the outcomes that you're going to get from that. Otherwise, engagement drops, and people go, "Well, why am I doing this? It doesn't do anything," and they're not making changes. So, at the end of the day, it all comes back to communication and human connection. Geez, I reckon. Yeah.
And that I love what you said right at the start. For both the employer and the employee, we can boil this all the way back to performance. When I look at why this was created in sport, it was created for performance. And I think how it was received when I first started doing this was sort of, why are you going to talk to the players about that? Almost like you're going to make them soft.
Yes.
You were going to make them hide behind this questionnaire, and you start making excuses and start bringing it more into this sort of touchy-feely world where this hyper-masculine environment really wasn't about that. And we had a number of instances where we did have players in crisis, and you'd have a guy going at his normal rate, and then all of a sudden you'd see a spike in stress. And a couple of times went to the GM and nothing was done about it. And then that player had a massive blow up that day in the media.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So very public.
Yeah.
And so that's when it started.
I bet your GM listened then.
Well, that's what he said. He said, well, you were a fortune teller on that one, weren't you? 'Cause I went to him that morning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes down to your employee's performance, and when it comes as an employee, when it comes down to your performance in your role, that's what this was created for. Right? We know if we create the optimal conditions for a human to perform, then they will do that. And that includes both the psychology and the physical environment.
Jez, how did you find, because you don't know what you don't know as well.
Yeah.
In all areas. So I remember, feedback early days in sport was, well, don't ask a question about this and make a mountain out of a molehill if it wasn't even registered anyway. Well, sooner or later, that's going to become an issue, sort of thing. So did you find that with your players that, or the GMs and the coaches, don't overanalyze, or you don't know what you don't know. So let's just leave it at that, and hopefully it doesn't come up. I found that a little bit early days as well, that they would, if we don't know about it, we won't have to act on it.
Yes, I found that in a number of areas, all the way from medical.
Yeah.
Right. Let's not test their blood work for this in case we find something and then we have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But all the way into psychology, which, essentially we just weren't used to having these conversations. As men, we didn't deal with that stuff. Yeah. And so I think that was one of the biggest parts of bringing this in. It was almost a little bit under the radar to start with.
Yeah.
And it was sort of for the support staff to deal with. And then we slowly started bringing people out, I think, as we could trust them.
Yep.
Because that was the other thing that I think athletes were very worried about, what this would say about them.
Yeah.
To the coach, if they're revealing that they have some mental health struggles, would the coach think they were soft? Would the GM think they weren't stable?
Yeah.
And
we're going to normalize it.
Huge trust element to this in how we dealt with that initially. We had to make sure we were responding.
Yeah.
And then slowly bringing in it, sort of extending that circle into people that we can actually trust.
One of the things, Jez, we do, and it all comes down to stigma, isn't it? It's all around that trust. When we onboard a client, we've got a non-negotiable 1-hour workshop on decreasing mental health stigma in the workplace. Right. And it's a really good catalyst to get doing what the topic suggests, but then it's about, keep re-educating staff members on trying to normalise this whole stigma around mental health. And it's got to a stage here in Australia now where it's something like Readiness used to be a nice to have. Now it's a must have with this new legislation around the psychosocial hazard. So even those leaders who just think it's an absolute load of rubbish, well, bad luck. You're going to have to do something proactive about this. Otherwise, you'll either get a huge fine, you'll end up in jail, or worse, someone in your care on your watch is going to be in a bad way. So we've actually found with Readiness, getting in the door of future clients now is a little bit easier and a little bit quicker turnarounds from those decision makers and directors and CEOs, because unfortunately not all of them, can have be doing things for the right reasons. But as long as we get in the door and we help their staff, we don't care how the hell we get in there, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point here as well, because, we don't have legislation like that here in the United States, and I don't ever see that we will. One of the things that made us successful in preventing injuries in sport was that all the way from the top, the GM through the coach, through myself, it was mandatory that the players were involved in the system.
Yep.
Right. They couldn't miss appointments with the physio. They couldn't miss the injury screening. And so initially, even though there was pushback to this new system that was coming in, because they had to be involved in it, they saw the benefits.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And once they saw the benefits, they wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that that's an advantage that you'll have there, is that because people have to participate, you'll really see the benefits of what can be done here. How do you approach those situations where it isn't mandatory? You're coming in, maybe it's HR bringing this system in. How do you approach that then and make this fit and increase engagement within a community?
Great question. And this is the stickiness, we call it, over time, is always the hardest with engagement, especially with wellbeing. We've had a look at the stats, Jez. For every sort of 100 employees, you'll have around a third, especially with this new generation, next generation coming through, super proactive about their well-being. They'll go into a workplace going, okay, what can you do for me? And this is part of that offering. You'll have about a third or a bit more reactive than that. They might fill a check-in survey out 2 out of 4 weeks. They might have a look at 5 or 6 resources, but it's a bit more reactive. They go, geez, I've been a bit tired lately. I might have a look at some sleep resources or interventions, or I want to lose a bit of weight and get a bit more fit, or I've been a bit stressed. I want to work out, what's this mindfulness and meditation all about, sort of thing. So then you'll have a third, Jez, and they're usually the blue collar middle-aged males. They could sublux a shoulder and they still wouldn't go and see a doctor to get it put back in, let alone do anything about their mental health, let alone do anything proactive about their mental health. Yeah. So you can lead the horse to water, you can't make them all drink, but from an environment, a business point of view, a lot of our clients now are putting in employee contracts, hey, this is our wellbeing offering.
Yeah. And what difference are you finding with that? We talked about engagement and saying like the gold standard is like 40%.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
Sport. In sport, if you went and said to your coach 40% of your roster is unavailable or
coach,
available.
I've done my job, mate. 40% are fit. Yeah.
And what difference does engaging in this process make for them?
It's pretty, like, the more you put in, the more you're going to get out. So with Readiness will show you and guide you the areas that you need to put some energy and effort into, and the areas that you're thriving in from an individual point of view, and give you the tools to put into your toolkit to help you thrive and help you get through that. Mm-hmm. From a business point of view, the richer your data, the better. So the more engagement you've got, you get a whole, if you've only got 5% of your staff actually doing it, well, you're not getting a good snapshot of what's going on in your business. So, the more hints and tips and tricks that you can do to get your staff engaged. And again, a lot of that, we've got the tech answers for all of that stuff. But one of the big ones, Jez, we've found is the clients who have the most engagement allow permission on company time to look after their well-being. So, for example, we've got a couple of been there on the days when this happens. You're in a couple of our manufacturing clients. The big siren goes off at about 8:45 in the morning, which means tools down. Each employee's got 15 minutes. Go and do your readiness check-in, which takes 45 seconds. Buddies check in on each other. Go and grab a coffee. Go for a walk. Some of them completely go against the idea of well-being. Some will go and have a smoke. But it's the company's allowing time on company time for their staff to communicate, check in, and the engagement just goes through the roof. And making sure that we've got educated, we call them readiness champions within the organisation, who are all mental health first aid trained, high in empathy, and actually genuinely care about other staff members, and all the staff know who they are, and they can go and have chats with them and help them on their wellbeing journey. So that all-inclusive environment, which starts at the top, seem to get the best outcomes with all things engagement from there. So it's like clients have catch-up Tuesday, wellbeing Wednesday, fitness Friday, and we help them with all of that. But again, it's as you know, Jez, wellbeing is it's not a linear progression. Everyone has their ups and downs, but we need to learn to get into that proactive mindset to stop and just reflect
Yeah.
for a minute, even if it's 1 minute once a week. But then having access to plenty of help and plenty of experts is what we're all about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the data piece you mentioned there is really important, as much for the employee as the employer. What I really love about systems like this is that closed loop system, where I can now start relating my behaviors directly to the outcomes.
Yep.
And I think having that data available to you when you know what's leading to poor sleep.
Yep.
In sport, often when we were gathering data, for example, on sleep, it wouldn't be that we could necessarily change it in that moment. We could pull a few levers on how we could change performance acutely. But for example, one guy, we noticed that he suddenly started having really poor sleep. And it just led to a conversation that basically led to the revelation that, we've just started, or they've just started construction across the street to my home in Manhattan. So rather than just let that go on.
And you wouldn't have known that, mate. You wouldn't have known that.
No way.
No. Yeah.
No, because he wouldn't have come and said anything.
Nah. Yeah.
And so we move him to a hotel, sleep scores go back to normal levels, and his performance continued.
Yeah.
And so before we saw the performance dip, we were able to identify that there was a change in behavior and a change in one of the wellness markers we were studying.
Yeah.
And we were able to proactively make that change rather than wait for performance to dip and then ask him.
Proactive, nip it in the bud. A lot of these data, Jez, I find they're conversation starters, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Like you wouldn't have known. And we've got so many examples of that, as you know. Yeah. You see these little dips and drops and peaks and in the data, and it leads to a conversation that you can have with your athlete or your employee that can make, in that small, probably 1 minute conversation you had with him, how's the outcome was huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I found really important about all of this stuff as we start learning the impact of these softer traits on performance, both mental performance and physical. This is stuff like your decision-making ability.
Yeah.
It's how you can learn.
Yeah.
It's how you communicate. All of this stuff, like a fearful, stressed mind doesn't learn, communicate, make decisions. Everything becomes very, very safe and non-risk taking.
Yeah.
And so I think looking at how this data is directly impacting your employees' well-being, but then ultimately their performance and your bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's such an important emphasis that needs to be put on this to create an environment where your employees can really flourish.
Yeah, and just as much with that, Jez, to get a status of the readiness of your staff is also the intervention that we put in for work-life balance 3 weeks ago. What effect has that had? So the data then shows you, what positive or negative effects or whatever effect, what outcome has happened for the interventions that you put in place in the last few days, last few weeks, last few months, sort of thing. So you then get that direct feedback as a leader to say, okay, well, gee, that was a great move, that one. When we see these trends happening again, we know exactly what we need to do. And just as important, that intervention we put in, that backfired. When we see this again, that's still good news. As much we still know more than what we did previously. And back to your point with the athlete you had with sleeping, Jez, is like if you've never had anything like this in your workplace, that's probably one of the biggest bits of feedback we get early on when we onboard a client is the business leaders going, oh my God, we had no idea about blah, 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 blah. We had no idea there was bullying going on, or we had no idea that our staff are sleeping so poorly, or there's such a big push for improvements to the lunch that we offer them so on.
Right.
So these are real examples. Even to show you how holistic we are, Jez, we've got the urine colour charts and the hydration charts that get pinned up in toilets because we know that how important hydration is. And people say on readiness days, when some of the questions are around, are you drinking the amount of levels? People say, geez, I drink so much more water on my readiness day. Or a lot of people say, well, I get that cue to check in on people I haven't checked. I ring my brother every readiness day because I get that question. So I'll call him on the way home. I know he's struggling a little bit. So those little things, again, they don't all have to be big things, but those little wins that we find there as well. But early days, one of our first clients have like 10 warehouses around in this huge block of land that they're building stuff in. And we noticed the hydration levels for warehouse 7 are really low compared to everyone else. And it's going, what's going on there? Go out and have a look, and the drinking fountains are all broken, and the power for the fridges for people to put we wouldn't have known, like otherwise nothing would have. So that was a bit of one of you always remember your first little wins along the way, and that was one of them there. And even another organisation, the head of HR was looking at overall wellbeing scores for all of their staff on a longitudinal view. And I'm sitting down with her and I said, what happened here? There's this massive dip, and she gets her diary out and has a look. And she said, oh my God, that was the day after the redundancy emails went out to all the staff. This was, and then I think it was around 2.5 weeks later, bang, this almighty spike in overall well-being, mind, mood, life satisfaction. I said, so what happened here? And she again gets the diary out and she goes, oh my God, that's like a day or two after the emails went out to say, hey, well done. If you didn't hear from us, you still got a job and you're not being made redundant. So everyone, it wasn't a great way of going about it. And they've since improved that method of communication. But that's when we sort of, another bit of an aha moment going, wow, look at the power that this shows. And it shows that back to the trust that the staff are really engaged in it and answering appropriately. And, what it gives the decision makers a really good snapshot of what's going on and some answers in what to do.
Yeah, I've always really thought that about if we're collecting data and it doesn't impact change, we shouldn't be collecting the data. Correct. Because it just leads to cynicism. I think if you're doing that,
waste of time.
And this is great examples of a physical change that was able to be made. Like we didn't know the power out to this part of the facility, but then also a policy and a procedural change in, wow, like we need something in place for when we have to make these decisions. We need to do something for the morale.
Yes.
Of the organization. We need to handle this difficult situation differently.
Better, yeah. And looking back, that was early days, and they were looking back retrospectively over it. But now they know, and now they've got limits and thresholds. They go, gee, our readiness score was 48. Remember, that was the time we had the redundancies, and we need to make some interventions and changes now to get these scores back up. Not across the board, because we can use the filters and duck in and go, okay, this is only. And there's the other part, Jez. You coming out of sport, it's horses for courses, and it's trying to, if we've used a fair bit on sleep today, we can continue there. But like if it's the HR, if it's the marketing department that aren't sleeping too well and everyone else is fine, well then you don't have to drag everyone into a workshop on improving your sleep hygiene, for example. Let's just focus on that marketing department and get them humming along a bit better. So the data can be used really, really well by using the filters in there to make interventions and changes to those who need it and those populations that need it, as opposed to everyone. Yeah.
Well, Simon, I want to be respectful of your time here. I know you're a busy guy over there, and we wrap up every conversation with 3 takeaways, and I think we've got 2 sort of groups here to speak to. We've got the employers. What are 3 things that employers can do? And then maybe on the employee side, what are 3 things that everybody out here in the real world can do to take care of their own mental well-being?
Probably start with your last one there, Jez. We're all very reactive. I think we can, and we spending, even if it's a minute a week or a minute a day, just checking in on yourself on how you're tracking. I think we can all do that really well. And accompanying that is checking on others on how they're feeling. And that's certainly if we start with that, we're going to go a long way. So if some of the best armies and defense forces out there, that the mantra is look after the person next to you. So if you're in a group of 10, team of 10, you got 9 other people who are looking out for you. So you're going to, if you're just looking out for yourself, well then, it's not going to go as far. Let's take that mentality out there as well. Yes, look after yourself, but spend some time and look out for those around you. And that's been some really good feedback we've had from employees is knowing that they've got others around them who genuinely care about them. And then from an employer point of view, Jez, know your employees, I think, is number one, without being too intrusive. But, in sport, we talk about the hitters and the huggers. You've got some players who just, if you need a lift in performance, they love getting screamed at and have, really short-term goals put in front of them, and they'll go, I'll show them that type mentality, and they know that they're going to get that lift out, whereas some just need the hug, and to get the most out of them. So again, not saying go out and hit and hug your employees, but know your employees and how they react and how to motivate them, I think is really important. Communication's still huge. You can do and have all these great systems in place, but as you mentioned a number of times, Jez, if you're not communicating the outcomes for this, engagement drops, and it's just a complete waste of time. If you get all that right, you're going a long way in setting up that environment that sooner or later is going to set up you for some great performance, because you've got a team working for you who want to work for you. Some of the best that I've mentioned before, they say they work for the boss. They don't really work for the company. They work in the company because the leaders are just such good people. So I think you want that environment. Yeah.
This has been great, mate. I really appreciate the insights here and love that you're bringing this element of professional sport into the real world. I think it's such a critical piece of performing at every level of an organization. And I think it'll make workplaces better for the employees, but it'll help the employers make that environment conducive to performance.
Yeah, exactly.
And make everybody more successful. So
exactly.
I love what you're building and really appreciate your time today. Simon, where can people find you?
Jez, readiness.com.au. We've got a school program as well on top of all of this. But yeah, all links to everything there is readiness.com.au, and Simon.Kearney at readiness.com.au. Jez might be able to put that in the feed somewhere. Shoot me an email if you want to learn a little bit more. Jez, thank you so much for having me on, mate, and keep doing what you're doing there. You haven't got to where you've got to because you're no good at what you do. You're one of the most successful fitness people and performance experts I've had the pleasure of knowing, mate. You've done it on a grand scale. So well done, Jez.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that.
Good on you, mate. We'll keep annoying each other from time to time, no doubt.
Excellent. Simon, we'll make sure all that gets linked. And again, we really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jez. You're a star.
All right. Cheers, mate. What a great conversation with Simon Kearney on how performance and mental well-being go hand in hand. Here are the 3 key takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, regular check-ins matter. A simple, consistent method to assess your psychological state helps you notice changes early and respond before they become a crisis. Number 2, well-being is a performance metric. Whether you're on the field or in the office, your ability to perform starts with how well you're feeling, physically and mentally. Number 3, empathy drives results. For leaders, knowing your team beyond the job title fosters loyalty, engagement, and better business outcomes. At Vitality Collective, we know the value of proactive well-being. Just like athletes fine-tune their routines for game day, you can fine-tune your life and leadership through smart data, consistent monitoring, and a human-first approach. If you're ready to take action and see how this system can support you or your organization, visit www.vitality-collective.com to learn more. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.